20,000 years ago, winter in parts of Europe could hit -40 degrees. No insulated walls, no heating systems, no stockpiled firewood delivered to your door. Just months of brutal, unrelenting cold with nothing standing between the human body and the outside world except whatever that person had managed to make with their own hands. And somehow, humans didn't just survive that. They spread further into cold, hostile territory than almost any other primate species in history. So how did they actually do it? Not in vague terms, but specifically physically day to day. Because the real answer involves a level of ingenuity that most people never learn about, and it starts with a problem you'd think would be unsolvable. The human body is frankly terrible at handling cold. We have thin skin, almost no fur, a body shape that loses heat quickly. Humans arrive dramatically under-equipped. If you dropped a modern human naked into an ice age winter, they'd have a matter of hours before hypothermia became lethal. So the first, most obvious tool was fire. But here's the part people underestimate. Fire alone wasn't nearly enough. A fire keeps one spot warm. It doesn't keep a moving, hunting, traveling human warm across an entire freezing landscape. For that, early humans needed something fire couldn't give them. They needed to become their own portable heating system. And the way they did that changed the entire trajectory of the species. Around 40,000 to 60,000 years ago, something small but extraordinary shows up in the archaeological record: bone needles. Thin, carefully shaped, with a tiny hole punched through one end. That detail matters more than it sounds like it should. A needle doesn't just mean humans had clothing. Neanderthals had clothing too. Thick furs draped and tied over the body, but draped fur has gaps. Cold air gets in at the seams, at the neck, at the wrists. A needle means something different. It means tailored clothing, fitted sleeves, sealed seams, layered garments sewn together so tightly that wind and cold couldn't slip through the cracks. This is where it gets genuinely clever. Researchers studying Ice Age clothing believe early humans were building multi-layer systems remarkably similar to what modern Arctic explorers use today. An inner layer against the skin, an insulating middle layer trapping warm air, and a tightly sewn outer layer blocking wind entirely. That's not primitive survival, that's engineering. And it didn't stop at clothing. Anthropologists studying ancient foot bones found something unexpected: a measurable shift in toe bone structure starting around 40,000 years ago. Human toes became slightly weaker and less curled, a pattern that shows up specifically in populations wearing supportive, structured footwear. In other words, they weren't just wrapping their feet in scraps of hide, they were making shoes, real, structured, supportive shoes, thousands of years before anyone would think to call it a shoe. But clothing and footwear solved the problem of moving through the cold. They didn't solve the much bigger problem of where to sleep. At a site called Mezhirich in modern-day Ukraine, archaeologists uncovered something almost unbelievable: dwellings built from mammoth bones, massive skulls and leg bones stacked and arranged into a structural frame, then covered with hides to block the wind and trap in heat inside. These weren't caves. These were built, engineered shelters, some of the earliest known architecture in human history, constructed specifically to survive an Ice Age winter, using the largest available building material on the entire landscape. Inside those shelters, archaeologists also found something else: small stone lamps, carved with a shallow bowl shape, filled with animal fat and fitted with a simple wick. A tiny, controllable, portable flame, heat and light that could be carried into a shelter and kept burning through the darkest, coldest months of the year. But here's a detail that surprises a lot of people: shelter, clothing, and fire still weren't the full picture. Survival also depended on something far more basic: fat. Lean meat alone can't sustain a human body through an Arctic winter. Without enough dietary fat, the body can't generate the internal heat it needs, no matter how many calories you're eating. This is a real physiological limit, sometimes called rabbit starvation, by later Arctic explorers who learned the hard way that lean meat alone will slowly kill you in the cold. Ice Age humans seem to have understood this instinctively, whether or not they could explain why. Bone marrow, animal fat, and blubber weren't treated as scraps. They were treated as essential, prioritized food, sometimes more valuable than the meat itself. And when food was abundant, they didn't just eat it, they stored it. Excess meat could be buried in permafrost, natural, ready-made freezers built directly into the frozen ground, preserving food for weeks or months at a time, turning a good hunt into insurance against a long, hungry winter. Now here's where the story gets even more interesting, because humans weren't the only hominins facing this exact same problem. Neanderthals lived through Ice Age winters for hundreds of thousands of years before modern humans ever arrived in Europe, but their solution to the cold was fundamentally different. Neanderthals were built for it. Physically, shorter limbs, a stockier build, a barrel-shaped rib cage, body proportions that reduced surface area and retained heat far more efficiently than the average modern human body. In other words, Neanderthals adapted to the cold biologically. Modern humans adapted to it technologically, and that difference may have mattered more than almost anything else in the story of who survived and who didn't. A body shape takes tens of thousands of years of evolutionary pressure to change. A sewing needle can be invented, copied, and improved within a single generation. When Ice Age conditions shifted rapidly, and they did repeatedly, sometimes within a human lifetime, a species relying on slow biological adaptation had far less room to adjust. A species that could simply invent a warmer coat, a better shelter, a more efficient lamp, that species could adapt at the speed of an idea, not the speed of evolution. None of this means Neanderthals were unintelligent. That's an outdated myth researchers have been correcting for years, but it does suggest that raw inventiveness, the ability to solve a problem with a tool instead of waiting on biology to catch up, gave modern humans a flexibility that turned out to matter enormously. So when you picture an Ice Age human surviving a brutal winter, don't picture someone just gritting their teeth against the cold. Picture someone wearing tailored, multi-layer clothing sewn with a bone needle, supportive shoes shaped to their feet, living inside an engineered shelter built from mammoth bone, burning a fat-fueled lamp for light and warmth, eating deliberately fat-rich food with a frozen backup supply buried in the ground nearby. That's not primitive survival, that's a functioning cold-weather technology system, built entirely from bone, hide, stone, and fire, thousands of years before anyone would think to call any of it technology at all. And in a strange way, almost everything in your closet right now, layered jackets, fitted sleeves, insulated boots, is still running on the exact same basic blueprint. We just don't sew it with bone needles anymore. If discoveries like this, the ones showing just how clever our ancestors really were, fascinate you as much as they fascinate me, subscribe, because this channel exists to dig up exactly this kind of hidden ingenuity buried in the human past.